Welcome to another episode of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. Exactly what influences you and how the influences affected your life. That's most of our conversation. And Terry, welcome back. We haven't been around in a while, have we?
Thank you. We've been social distancing and doing what it is we do, but here we are again. So yeah, great to be back.
Busy as a social distancer, I'll tell you that. We have a special guest with us today. We have a gentleman by the name of Mark Nudelberg. Hey, before we get started and find your background, there's something interesting I want to pass along is that as a kid growing up, how did you deal with the name Nudelberg?
I cried a lot. The nickname Noodle came early in my life and has carried with me all through my coaching career to the point where the kids that I coached would always call me Coach Noodle. So it quickly got shortened to Noodle, and that's been going on for years and years and years.
Hey, it could have been worse. I can only imagine. So we're going to leave it at that.
For sure.
Well, how would you like to have my last name as a kid?
Yeah, Tart's a little rough.
Yeah.
So what it did is that growing up, you became tougher, but at the same time, at this age, now it's a brand. How could you forget your name? And your 100%. First name is Mark with a C, which is short for Marcus?
No, it is not. It is just Mark with a C. Yeah, it's spelled differently because of some previous, family members that had passed away and who I was named after, and the ways they could incorporate different letters into my name. So Mark came about with a C, which I'm always glad, because anytime I meet somebody named Mark, my first question is with a K or a C, because I like them immediately more if they have a C.
Or KFC, either one.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I'm glad you're with us. I want to get a little bit about your background and why you're joining us and how you've influenced people and other people influence. But we play a game to get to know you our way. And this is the game. You have to just answer the question, and it'll start out real easy, but it gets more difficult. Are you ready? Can you hang on for this? Okay.
I'm in.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Cincinnati or Reno?
Cincinnati.
Childhood hero?
My dad.
Smartest person you know besides your dad?
This is a tough one. Brian Polian.
Okay. First job?
A bag boy at Publix.
Wow. Last book that you just finished reading?
Toughness by Jay Billis.
Favorite app?
The Spades app. It's a card game, Spades.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. Secret talent that nobody knows about you?
That's a good one. I'm double jointed in all my fingers.
Well, that's a talent.
I don't know if that's a talent or not, but I'm going with it.
That's a whole conversation we'll get to next. So
all right.
Mark. This is why we do these things,
See, we're getting to know you better than most people would. Coffee or cocktails?
Coffee.
Sunrise or sunsets?
Sunrise.
Simon Sinek or Seth Godin?
Simon Sinek.
Field of Dreams or Top Gun?
Oh, Top Gun.
All right. Favorite food?
Pizza.
Yeah, that comes out a lot. Last question.
Okay.
Who inspired you the most, and what was it that inspired you?
I don't know that I can really say that there's one person that's inspired me the most. I've been really, really fortunate to work with unbelievable leaders in my life, good and bad. And the bad ones that I worked with really helped me understand what not to do, which I think is just as important in understanding what to do. And working with some amazing leaders. I mean, my dad goes in that group immediately, but Eddie Gran, Brian Polian are three guys that just help really shape my mind and shape my decision-making process and my critical thinking and really everything that helped make me successful.
Can you explain who those people are? Because
Yeah, sure. My dad is Steve Noodleberg, who's an entrepreneur down here in South Florida and a serial sales guy, author, speaker, trainer. He's master of all trades.
not a serial killer. Right?
Not a serial killer. And Brian Polian was the head coach at the University of Nevada when I was there. Now he's the special teams coordinator and recruiting coordinator at the at Notre Dame. And Eddie Gran was the special teams coordinator at Florida State, who was my direct, my boss, as to say, aside from the head coach at Florida State. And now he is the offensive coordinator at the University of Kentucky.
Great. We'll dig deeper into that, and we'll dig deeper into influences. But tell us a little about who you are, about the background, about football, how you get involved, and what you're doing today, because people need to know that you're a president of a company today.
Sure. I'm a former college football coach turned entrepreneur. I spent 10 years in the college football ranks coaching special teams and offense and defense at every level of Division I college football, at the Power Five, as they would call the five major conferences in football, the Group of Five, which are the five mid-majors, and then the FCS level, which is a completely separate section that has their own playoff and championship. So was fortunate to work with a lot of great people at a lot of great places and learn the value of resources and how to do a job no matter what you had around you. So that's really my coaching background. And then I got out of coaching after my 10-year career, moved back to South Florida, got into sales and got into business, quickly saw the need for people to be coached. I understood as a football coach what my job was. I didn't realize that people who called themselves professionals, a lot of them don't even understand what it really takes to be a professional on a daily basis. So helping merge what made me successful in sports with what I know about business allows me to help people and businesses grow through sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Terry, you coach people too. What do you think what he just said?
Yeah, Mark, I concur. I mean, I'm a shrink by trade, so my life is interesting every day. But I found out early on, about 20 years ago, what you just found out is that, the world evolves around craziness. And I'm technically a stress doctor, so I deal a lot with stress and pressure and how people and organizations and teams handle that pressure and stress. And I commonly say to people that I'm coaching, the greatest athletes in the world have coaches, because I was doing this before it was called coaching. Mark, I'm old enough that, I was the therapist. So if an athlete had a therapist, you're like, oh, dude, you're more messed up than I am because I don't have one. So I was doing it before it was cool. But that was my pat answer, was the greatest athletes in the world all have coaches. I am a coach, and I'm going to coach you on how to succeed in life. So I really concur with what you're saying. And now it's a very powerful resource that the world recognizes as something, not just as an adjunct to success, but a necessary process we must need to go through.
It's interesting because I really enjoy working with salespeople because I come from a history of sales professionals. My grandfather being an entrepreneur and owning a women's shoe store, to my father who started in the shoe business, moved to clothing and cell phones, and then got into marketing and building his own company. And I've always understood how to be a professional in sales because it was passed down to me from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. What I realized when I got into the business world and started looking around at the other sales professionals was that they didn't really understand what it meant to be a professional or what was really the purpose of being a salesperson. I think somehow the industry had gotten changed to where it became this, oh, I'm going to be this shove it down your throat, never take no as a mentality, when really, being a salesperson, your job is to serve, is to deliver value. And I had been serving college students for a decade as a coach, teaching them how to be, obviously good football players, but how to be good students and how to become successful men, do that craft and that art of teaching and communicating and serving others for their better, that is sales. So the correlation to me was so clear, and I've never had more fun than I am now helping people really gain that extra 1% daily and do those things.
Nice.
Let me go back to the statement you said about professionals. They thought they were professionals. What is it that you see that makes them a non-professional, that you coach them? And also, what bad recommendations did they get that they're that bad maybe from other people?
So I don't think that it's their fault. I think that most people don't understand that in order to be a professional, you have to constantly train and practice. Tom Brady is the best quarterback in the world. He practices being a quarterback every day. He goes out and takes practice reps. He goes out and trains his body. He trains his mind. Most people that are in a profession, and I put that in air quotes for people that can't see us, but they're professionals, but they don't do anything to train themselves. They don't do anything to practice their skills, to sharpen their skills. They just show up every day. They go to work from 9 to 5. They don't really have a plan or a purpose. They just show up, do it, and go home. There's no review. There's no kind of improvement or development amongst their professionalism. So to me, being a professional meant being a professional athlete. I took college students and prepared them to become professional athletes, and I prepared them by getting them ready with constant daily improvement and development. Mm-hmm. I don't know a whole lot of people in the business world that do that, unless you're an entrepreneur and the paycheck is riding on your back and no money's coming in unless you're going out and developing the business. A lot of people who work in a corporate environment feel protected. They have a paycheck that's going to come on Friday, really, regardless of their performance. And so that's the way they go. They do enough to keep their job and continue to move forward, but they don't do anything to develop. So it's not necessarily, I think, their fault. It's just the culture that's been, curated year after year after year of the system and the way it works. So I think great organizations understand that. They invest in their people in constant development, which helps them become more successful and become better, whereas average organizations or organizations that end up failing don't.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I mean, there's such a mindset difference between an employee versus an entrepreneur. And I know employees that have an entrepreneurial mindset where they do show up and they do train and they do work hard. But you're right, it's an anomaly. I go hungry if I don't work. I hustle every day. I've owned my own business for 25 years, and you got to hustle. And during the midst of COVID-19, which no one knows what is really happening, the world is upside down, businesses going out day and night. But you know what? I get up and I do the same things every day. I get up, I start with prayer, I knock out my list, I make my phone calls. People are like, why you emailed me at 5:30 this morning. What are you doing? I'm like, bro, I'm up before it gets sunlight because I'm going to beat you. You see, so it's a mindset of tenacity, like from sport. I mean, I trained a lot of race car drivers, about 40 actually. IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One drivers. So they're at 230 miles an hour with their hair on fire, all with road rage and maniacs. So it's how do you slow down in the car without slowing the car down? You got to slow your mind down. Yeah. And so many times it's a mindset, like you said earlier, of just knowing how to do the discipline to play your game, whatever your game is, whatever your sport is, whatever your tenacity is. How do you play your game right today?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you hit on that word process so many times. Most companies train employees in an onboarding sense, whether it be a 1 week training, a month-long training. Right. And once that training is over, they may have a weekly call that is like updating them about information, or a monthly call that is giving them information, but there's no more training after that. Right. There's no more role play. There's no more any of the things that you teach somebody when you first bring them on to train them to do. You no longer hit that skill ever again. It's like, okay, we taught you how to do it in a month, and that should be enough to carry you for the rest of your career, when that's not reality, right? I mean, as human beings, we're either getting better or we're getting worse every day. You either read a book and learn something new and train your mind to continue to evolve and get better. You either get up and eat right and go to the gym and continue to train your body to be in better shape, or you don't, and you get further out of shape. You gain weight. You don't feel as good, or you don't read something or help your mind get better, and you lose intelligence. But staying the same is an impossible thing that somehow the masses have believed that this is a place that you can stay, and it's not. The reality is you're either getting better or worse every single day.
Yeah, linearity is flatline. That's death on an EKG or an EEG. So if you're flatlined, you're not in a good place. And I know Chet's going to jump in here, but I got to say this because it's so important in sports science. I drill this home all the time. Corporate America is so much harder than being an athlete for this reason. Athletes train 90% of the time, perform 10% of the time. Corporate America is just the opposite. They perform 90% of the time, train 10% of the time. That's why we're needed in corporate America to give them that training, because if you play 3 hours a week or 1 game a week or 3 games a week, that's still a small percentage. And the other time, you're training. Corporate America doesn't train, they do.
That's exactly right.
You know, it's interesting because the three of us coach in different areas. I mean, you're dealing with professional athletes, you're dealing with salespeople, and I'm actually dealing with CEOs changing their habits. And it's a constant. But let me go back a little bit, because you mentioned the fact that, you know, people get in their jobs and they're protected. A buddy of mine calls it pulse pay. They're getting paid because they have a pulse rather than doing anything else. So
Right.
I want to step back a second, because you brought up something and go, how do I know where to go to get training? So the very first time I bought my first company, I said, I need sales training. I don't know anything about sales. And I still have my first book I ever bought called Spin Selling. And I read the book and I didn't understand it until I got to one page. What do top salespeople do? And this is the only page I read. It says they do 2 different things. That's all I needed to read. They review each call. They decide what they've learned and what they're thinking about. And success depends on getting details right. That's the first one. And they understand details, and they put emphasis on planning and reviewing each call. And I go, that's all I really need to do right now to get better. So when I ran my sales meeting, this is all we did. We talked about how, because I didn't know any better. And it says here that influence on a customer is about asking questions. So I brought everyone together and I said, you know, it's about asking questions. Maybe we're not asking the right questions. So we created this white book called the Question Book. So every objection became a question. And I got to tell you, these guys loved it, you know, and and I don't remember all the questions, but one of the questions was, you know, I don't have the money to buy them. So the question that came up that I remember this day, is the money spent or allocated? I go, this is a great meeting, because I never thought about that. But you're right. So the question I have is, I did this on my own, but supposing I'm not smart enough, where would I find somebody like you? How would you do that? And how do I know you're going to put your arm around me and you're the right person to get me through this forest?
Yeah, I think that it's such an interesting world that we live in now, because social media, which is such an amazing tool and can be leveraged in a really positive way, it's also easy to get fooled in social media. I think It's easy to go out there looking for a sales trainer, and there's, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are paying for social media advertising, who are paying to show up in a Google paid search, and they may look the part. But to me, the only way to know whether or not you're hiring a coach that can really help you, is to have a conversation with them. If I can get you in a 5-minute window to answer a few questions for me, I know whether or not you're real. I know whether or not you're personable, because to me as a coach, it's about communicating. You can know everything. You could know exactly how to be the best salesperson in the world. But if you can't communicate it to other people and communicate it on a lot of different levels, then you're never going to be as successful as you could be, because you're going to leave a lot of people not understanding the message. And so that was my charge as a football coach, was I had to figure out how to reach 18 to 22-year-olds to teach them how to be good special teams players. That's hard. It's a hard thing to do because most of them don't want to play special teams. Most of them are interested in being the starting running back or being the starting receiver or whatever position it is that they play. They're only interested in doing that. And if they're not doing that, they don't care what else it is. So to me, how do you create trust and belief immediately with whoever it is that you're communicating with to then be able to deliver them the message that you want them to receive? Because if people don't trust you or believe you, they're never going to listen to what you have to say.
I
So
agree.
trust is number one. Yeah.
Trust. Yeah, it's a big one. I tell companies and individuals all the time, I go, look, I agree. Let's have a 5-minute conversation. If we click, great. If we don't, no harm, no foul, man. It's all good. Because if I get 5 minutes, that 5 minutes has got to be rock your world. And I either know or I don't know. And if you don't, that's cool. I got to move on. But it's so true. You got to have a connection.
The other thing is, and I believe wholeheartedly in this, and we train people on this, is LinkedIn is Yelp for salespeople.
Yeah.
If you go to somebody's LinkedIn page and they have 3 recommendations, I'm immediately moving on from them. If you're a successful coach and you can only get 3 people to write you a recommendation, that's a major red flag in my world. I mean, you got to at least be able to find 10 people. You know, my recommendations are filled with players that I've coached, with sales professionals that I've worked with companies that I've worked with, people, anybody that I interact with. Some people I might not even do business with. I might have just met them for coffee one morning and delivered them a great piece of information because we had a good conversation. And I'll say, hey, would you write me a recommendation based on that? Awesome. To me, if people aren't willing.
So after this call, will you share recommendations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll get it. We'll get each other. But it's true, you know, because recommendations are just that. If you recommend somebody, that's a pretty powerful thing. And like I said, there's a lot of people that just, I mean, if your resume can't speak for you, maybe you shouldn't speak for yourself, you know, and you've got to be able to have something to say.
To me, the resumes are the people. The resume is not, well, I've been a special teams coordinator, all of these places. Right. I've worked with a lot of football coaches that had been in the profession for 40 years, that had coached at every major Division I school, that were the worst football coaches I've ever been around. I couldn't believe that they were still in the profession, much less ever got into the profession. Right. But so to me, the resume can be misleading because you never know why somebody got hired somewhere, why they got fired somewhere. So to me, if I want to know that I'm going to hire you to help me do something, I got to meet you first so that I can see you face to face. That doesn't have to be in person. Obviously that can be virtually now. And then I want to know what other people have said about you and what those recommendations are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you met a sales trainer that's better than you?
I'm sure. I mean, you know,
I don't claim. What was the quality? I mean, when I say better, I mean, I have met people. There's always someone. When I started my career, someone said there's always someone to be better than you and worse than you. So pay attention to the person better than you and look for that one particular quality.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my dad's a better sales trainer than I am. He's a better storyteller. He's a better storyteller than I am. Mm-hmm. You know, I think most of what I do, I immediately relate to an athletic background. Like I can easily draw the lines and connect the dots between what's happening in this corporate space to what happened in a coaching environment in the sports world and in the football world that I came from, and draw parallels and create stories that way, where my dad draws on his 40 years of experience in the business world through retail and all his other industries to tell that story. So, you know, to me, you know, everybody has insecurities. Everybody has doubt. I don't claim to be the smartest person in the room. I just know that I've moved from industry to industry and that the things that have made me successful in both are the same things. It's not like I had to learn a whole new skill set to become successful at what I was doing. I just had to change some of the tactics, but the fundamentals of creating a process, being disciplined to that process, and rinsing and repeating that process over and over and over is what made me successful, both in football and in business. And I think people have a hard time understanding that, or just building out their own process. Because when it comes to the mental side of things, which, I mean, at Florida State, we were one of the early teams to adopt mental conditioning. And this is where I really learned about the power of the mind, and the power of negative thoughts, and the power of positive thoughts.
I heard you mention that this morning with Trevor.
Sure, with Trevor Moawad.
Right.
And the power of verbalizing those things, and what happened not only when you thought it, but then when you actually said it out loud, what would happen there. So understanding the power of the mind, and that everything was really a mindset, to then, well, how do we train our minds to operate at a higher level than everybody else, and quote unquote flip the switch. And what I really realized was that flipping the switch was really not flipping the switch. It was preparation. As long as I prepared the right way for practice, I didn't really have to flip a switch. I just had to make sure I was focused. If I was focused and my attention was on practice and I had prepared the right way, things would go well. They weren't going to go perfect. Nothing ever goes perfect, but they would go better than the majority of the other people that weren't as prepared as I was. If something came up, it was easier to adjust and make an adjustment to continue, doing what we had to do, or to continue to find success, because we had prepared for it. So I was like, oh, we can just make this change, and there we go, as opposed to the person that was unprepared, and then a piece of adversity hit, and they're like, oh, what do we do now? And now it's this whole chaos of, well, we don't know what to do or how to do it. And you're trying to create the plan there when you had prepared for it. You just, okay, here, let's make this adjustment and go this way and do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful. I got one last question, Terry. And this may be a tough one, but I think about this all the time. What is a quality that you see in top leaders that sustain excellence, that they do on a regular basis, that they're excellent every day? What are some of the qualities have you noticed?
I mean, to me, the two most important things are listening and communication, right? They have to be able to hear and really receive what's happening around them. And then they have to be able to clearly communicate to the people that they lead what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and how it's going to be implemented. I think that's the cadence of communication, especially in today's world where you're dealing with a lot of young people, where the do it because I told you so no longer works. We live in a world of young people that have grown up with information at their fingertips. That was not the world I grew up in. I knew things because my grandfather or my father or my mother or somebody older than me had told me that this is what it was. And it was that way because they knew. They were older than me. I wasn't able to go onto my phone and Google something to figure out whether or not that was true, or find out the real reason why the sun came up. If my grandmother told me the sun came up on the east side of town because that's where it went to bed, that's what I believed. You know what I mean? That was the world that I grew up in. Whereas in today, the information is abundant. So when I was coaching the 18 to 22-year-olds, the older coaches who had taught me to do something because that was the way it was supposed to be done didn't work for me anymore. They were asking me why. So if I wasn't able to communicate the why, now I've lost all credibility because I'm the one teaching what we're doing, but I don't know why we're doing it. So I think the other key thing as a leader is you're listening, you communicate, and you're constantly thinking critically about what you do and why you do it. Because the world is forever evolving. The environment is constantly changing. And if you're not willing to evolve and change with it, it will eventually pass you by with all of the people in it. So thinking critically about your process, about your business, why do we have these things in place? Why are we doing these things? Why are we doing these things? Does it make sense still? Yes, it still makes sense. I can clearly communicate the why behind it, fantastic. Keep it. Let's keep doing it. No, this no longer makes sense. Well, what do we need to do in order to make it make sense? Or do we need to get rid of it because it just doesn't fit the environment that we live in anymore? So I think listening, communicating, and thinking critically about what and why they do things, that to me, if you do that as a leader, I don't care what industry you're in, I don't care whether you work with machines or people or by yourself, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. How do people find you, Mark?
Social media everywhere. So I'm on LinkedIn as Mark Noodleberg, Facebook as Mark Noodleberg, Instagram as @Coach Noodle, Nudel, and on Twitter as @Coach Noodleberg, Nudelberg.
Great.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to have to listen back a couple of times because there are great nuggets in it. And then I'm expecting us to write each other great comments on our LinkedIn page.
That's exactly right.
Terry, I don't think I wrote anything on yours yet, so I got to write on yours too.
Yeah, it's all good, man. I've got enough probably that say what they want to say, so it's all good. So, Mark, it's great.
Terry and Chet. Yeah, Terry and Chet, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show with you guys. Obviously, I always love talking mindset and behaviors that create success. So this is really great.
This is powerful. Thank you, Mark. This has
Thank
been
you,
another
guys.
edition of Influence Today. We'll catch you on our next time with Terry and Chet. Okay.